Okay, why don't we get started? This is loud. I'm Andy Beckman-Rodeau, I'm a professor at Suffolk University Law School. And let me just get an idea. How many people are law teachers here? And how many of you are tech people? Wow. Why are you here? You're not going to learn anything. But okay. Just a little quick background, and I just want to talk about what I'm going to really look at today, which is mostly oriented towards law faculty. For those of you who are tech people, I suppose, and you can take away some ideas to suggest to faculty. I'm a long-time user of technology. Actually, I've been using it 14 or 15 years. And when I started using it, of course, the students thought I was nuts. And they would say things like, you expect us to have an email account? What, are you nuts? We're not going to do that. The equipment was expensive and took a lot of time to set everything up. Today, though, it's totally different. The new generation of students, not only are they ahead of most of the faculty, they expect you to use it all the time. And if I say I'm going to download, post a PDF file, they're all like, okay. They don't ask me what does PDF mean anymore or anything else. So I find very little student resistance. Yeah, I guess what I'm going to focus on is that the majority of people teaching law school today, you already have enough equipment without buying expensive stuff. That's for the, any deans in the audience? Deans like to hear that. We're not going to spend money. Almost everyone has a PC. You have internet access. Those two things alone, you can do a tremendous amount. If you add to that a scanner, which if you don't have a scanner, you probably actually do, because most of the copy machines today have scanning built in. Just have to have someone turn it on. And if you add to that a digital recorder, you can do an incredible amount of stuff. And you're not talking about, spending a lot of money. Again, that's for the deans. One thing, also a preliminary thing, why use technology? That's one of the questions I often get from some of my colleagues. I actually use all this stuff. It takes time. It's a pain in the ass. It's too hard. The equipment doesn't work, et cetera, which are all, wonderful excuses. But the real question is, why use technology? Especially in the classroom. Because I've only started using it in the classroom actually a few years ago. Most of my use has been outside the classroom to extend it, which I still think is probably the best use. But nevertheless, in the classroom, what I found is, and I've gotten more attuned to this since I've kids, is that you make a richer learning environment. People have a lot of different learning styles. Law school classrooms traditionally are designed for auditory learners. The person speaks and everyone listens. And having not being an auditory learner, I always found law school, when I was in law school, a lot of it was a blur. They say, they mentioned a hypothetical. I'd be writing the hypothetical down. By the end of the class, I still hadn't had the hypothetical straight, so I never heard the discussion. So, some people are auditory learners, other people are visual learners. And there's different ways they can put things up, display things different ways. It just creates a richer learning environment. The other two things I find important is it extends the learning environment. Some of my colleagues say I'm nuts for doing this, but I tell my students, email me if you have questions or anything else. I run a Blackboard site, there's a bulletin board, and I get many more students will, contact me. Sometimes some get carried away. I have one student in my class last year who would send me these 2-page emails about every other day. But that's the exception. But I do find I reach more students, and then there's more interaction one-on-one that's beneficial for them. The other thing is also, you know, a lot of students are busy today. At Suffolk, we have about 500 night students. They don't have time to, you know, to chase down faculty. So one of the things they find really useful, they do it at work, I have a feeling, on their employers' computers, they, you know, contact me by email, and I can send documents back and forth, or whatever needs to be sent back and forth. And the final thing is entertaining. Just call that right? Yeah. Technology is entertaining. Why is that important? Well, part of teaching is entertaining, because if you don't entertain people, they fall asleep. Or they don't pay attention, or as I like to say, they fall asleep with their eyes open. They don't pay attention unless they're interested. So, to some extent, it gets them interested, especially, you know, my son's 19 and my daughter's 18. You know, it's a real video generation, and they seem more attuned to that multitasking. Kids, you know, have the iPods on, the cell phone, and they're on the computer watching TV and studying at the same time. I'm not quite sure how they do that, but from what I've observed with their friends, it's pretty common. So maybe they're much better at multitasking. Rather than look ahead, as a lot of the programs in today, a lot of great ideas and a lot of interesting technology, I'm kind of going to look back and focus on, over the last, you know, number of years, decades of using technology, what's worked, what hasn't, mostly what has worked, a little about what hasn't worked. But I want to focus on stuff that's worked and that it's not that difficult to do, and it's relatively easy. It can enhance the classroom tremendously. And I guess I should add one caveat, you know, most of the things I'm going to talk about, I think are relatively easy to use. But of course, I guess that's a relative term. I mean, one disclaimer, before I was a law professor, before I was an attorney, I was an aerospace engineer, so I'm a little comfortable with technology. So some of my colleagues, you know, think I'm not the, well, one of them said the other day to me, he said, well, you're not the normal law professor. I think that was a comment. I don't want to ask, because I really don't want to know. First question, you know, to think about is if you're going to use technology in teaching, is you have to have a platform. And there's many choices. These are probably the commonest choices that are available. And I built my own website a number of years ago, and I have a thumbs down on that, because if you have lots of free time and you like playing with technology, by all means build your own website. It's not worth the time. It's not time efficient. It's very difficult to update. It was a lot of fun to build, though, but I'm not sure that it's a really useful way to manage all your material, unless, well, we'll leave it at that. Twin and also Blackboard run on LexisNexis. Those are probably the two best things, the easiest things to use, largely because they're free. Yeah, that's the deans like to hear that. You know, Westlaw and LexisNexis provides those and supports them for faculty, and they don't charge. I've also found both of them pretty similar. I use Blackboard. I'll talk about why in a minute. I don't have any connection with either one of them. I think they're both pretty good. They both have really good technical support, I found. They want to keep you as a customer. So I've called up, and 3 hours later, they've solved whatever problem it is. Blackboard. I've been using LexisNexis Blackboard this summer for the first time. I stopped using my web page. It became too much work. But I'm using LexisNexis Blackboard largely because Blackboard's a pretty dominant product in the educational world. Even though LexisNexis runs it, it's just a standard Blackboard program, which is used a lot. The Twin program, it looks to me like it's proprietary. I don't know, it could go away, it could disappear. Blackboard has pretty good market penetration, but the two of them are relatively similar as far as I can tell. The last choice, a local system. I put a question mark up because that really depends on a lot of things. We have at Suffolk, we have Blackboard, we run it locally. It has some advantages and some disadvantages. It runs locally, it certainly runs faster because it's in the same building. But and you can customize it, and you know where your material is. And also, if you've been integrated with the registrar system, then all the registration data for the students and the classes can be downloaded directly into Blackboard. You'll set up the email list. You can even have pictures, whatever you want. But the one caveat when I say it's a question, it's only worth doing if you have really, really good local tech support. If you don't have enough, many schools don't have enough tech people, or they have, 4 times the work that 3 people can do or 2 people can do. If you don't have good local support, you're probably better off running LexisNexis Blackboard or Twin, because I found them to be amazingly responsive. I'm a pain. I call them, I want to do this, I want to do that. Oh, we can't do that. Well, but I really like to do it. All right, we'll get back to you. 3 hours later, the next day, they figured out some way that I could do it. Very responsive. Let me just take you through, I just created screenshots of what my site looks like. I was worried doing it live that the internet, my connection might not be up, so I just made screenshots. If you go to mine this summer, you'll see the CALI test one I just put up to use. I'm not using it. But you'll see the menu of the courses. I'm teaching full-time this summer, and I'm teaching actually at 2 different schools. That was another thing. I called up LexisNexis, and they want all the courses to come up on the same menu. And they said no, and I said, well, I really want it. They said, okay, we'll figure it out. And the next day, they figured it out. So I type in my Suffolk password, all my Northeastern password, and all the courses come up. So let's say we clicked on the first one where the arrow is. What would you see? Well, that's the opening page for my course. That's little, you can make it fancy or as simple as you want. The little logo there on top of the house, that's of course because the dean spent a lot of money on a marketing campaign, so we've got to use the logo as much as possible. Below that there's, typical Blackacre, and you click on it, it tells you all about the origin and why property teachers talk about Blackacre. Those are kind of, silly things. I have too much free time. Well, let's say you could click on list of assignments, which is starting to get into some of the stuff that I think is useful. And I have this in each one of my courses. And what the students will get when they click on that is they'll see the dates and the assignments for that particular class. And that's nothing terribly revolutionary. But what I also do is I have lots of hyperlinks. And you'll see some of them say notes, questions, problems, and one vertical pop off. I also had a lot of cases. And the reason why this is, take a look at the, if you go to notes, questions, or problems, for example, this is typical what I put up there. I try to include questions relevant to the discussion. One of the things I've always never liked is a lot of the case books have all these wonderful questions after the cases that when I was a law student, I figured, oh, I'm a law professor, I never understand these. Now I figured out that no one can answer half the questions because they're too esoteric most of the time. So I create questions, I go back and look at my notes. What are the things I asked? What are the questions up? Gives them some framework for when they read a case, they kind of have an idea what I'm going to talk about in class. And then also I'll put all my problems and hypotheticals included in these for each class. And why I do that, that's to create class efficiencies, and I don't spend 10 minutes saying, this is the hypothetical dictated, then Jane says, what did you say? Joe says, what did you say? And you got to repeat it 27 times. This way, it's on there, they can print it out before class, they can read it, some of them will print it out and bring it with them, they can look at it during class. That way, so the students that aren't auditory learners can read it. They don't have to waste a lot of time. I figured out they'll probably save a couple of classes by the end of the semester just by not having to dictate hypotheticals to people. I often don't use them all. Usually I put in many more than I can use in class, and I tell the students, these are good for you to use on your own. You can go through these hypos, and you can use them to study group, whatever, and you can figure out what the answer should be. You're probably doing okay. If you have no clue to what the answer should be, well, that's a good self-diagnostic tool. Maybe you should come and talk to me. And many of them do the problems. Of course, that's because I give them an incentive. I tell them that, often some of these problems will cure the exam. They usually tends to work very well. About once every 3 years I do that. That's enough. Problems, because they might get lucky that year. I don't tell them the odds. And then cases. I frequently incorporate additional cases. Because, if you do it on Blackboard or on Twin or any of the systems, it's easy. You download it off the internet, I edit it, and then I just upload it right back to the Blackboard. There's no paper ever created. I don't have to be at school to do this. In the old days, I rarely added cases because you had to download them, and you had to manually edit them. Someone had to copy them. And the copy center had to collate, copy, and staple them, and then pass them out. It was too much work. So I just never bothered. And you had to plan way in advance. This way, I do a lot of stuff at home late at night. Those interesting cases. I just do it all from my house, and students are always amazed where it popped up from. One of the reasons that I find this useful is if you get recent cases out of the news, students can relate to them. I'll give you an example. The first property case I do when I teach first year property is Pearson versus Post, where you got two people chasing a fox and the fox hunt, one kills it, the other one grabs it. And the students are really enthralled with this, you know, they're sitting there going, I don't know what fox hunts for, this doesn't happen too often. So I do that, and then I do the pop-up case. That involves the Barry Bonds baseball for the 73rd home run he hit a couple of years ago. Two people fighting over it, and then when caught, figured whose property it was. Same basic fact pattern as Pearson versus Post, but the students can relate to this. They get excited about it, and you end up with a good discussion because it's a contemporary thing. And the beauty is I can add this in like 10 minutes. If I find something interesting, I just go into the list of assignments and I just plop it in with a hyperlink, and the case just pops up. It also saves me from the students saying, oh, I didn't get the handout, I lost it, etc. They all have internet access either at school or at home. Another thing I put up, and I do this increasingly, summary of black letter rules of law. I do it for a couple of reasons. One, this is something, for example, water rights. I don't really have time to spend on it. I used to teach a 6-credit property course in Southwark. It's a 5-credit, so I have to leave something out. But I kind of think they ought to know a little about it. So I've made up these short 1, 2-page, 3-page max kind of handouts, and again, I hyperlink them, which is good because otherwise all the students come back to you about exam time and say, you know that handout on water rights, I can't find it. Can I have a copy? And I really don't want to, spend the time printing up copies for students. So the efficiencies are they just go back and they print it out. It's there. They lost it, they go print another copy out. The other reason I do this is I prefer students have accurate rules of law rather than go to some silly study aid, because I hate when they come to me and they say, well, it says in such and such study aid the following. And I say, well, that's nice, but it's not right. Well, how could it be wrong? So this way, they don't have to run around looking for things. I give them what they need to use. I mean, one complaint is, and I've heard this from some faculty, well, if you just give them all the rules of law, then why are they going to come to class? Well, because this also allows me to spend more time in class applying the rules. These are the rules. I won't talk about how to apply them, problems, etc. And usually I find just having memorized the rules doesn't really give them any better understanding of the material. I also, with a very good arrow at the top button, I found it very useful to include recent articles, especially newspaper articles. In the areas I teach, patent law, intellectual property law, in addition to property law, almost every other day in the newspaper there's an article related to subject area. And so I simply load them, they go to that button, those are an example of articles they would see. And again, it gives them at least an understanding that there's some relevance to what we're talking about. Because a lot of the cases we look at deal with fact patterns and things that are ancient to the students. And as I've gotten older, I realized ancient means, pre-1990. I mentioned something that happened in 1980, and they look at me like I'm ancient. And I realized, oh yeah, they weren't probably born yet, some of them. They talk about the 50s, they really look at me like I'm nuts. My daughter recently, she's 18. And I told her I was in high school in the 60s, and she looked at me and she couldn't believe that. You were in high school in the 1960s? I didn't think I was that old. She has a way of making me feel old, because she told me I was an old fart after that. That's a quote. But okay. One of the things I've run into, and I think it applies to technology in general, you have to be careful not to overload your students with stuff. Because one of the things is, because you can do it doesn't mean you should. I was often guilty of that. I like playing with technology so much sometimes. I would do things and I'd later think to myself, this is really educationally beneficial to anyone. And I think, no, it really wasn't, but it's fun to do. So you got to be careful about that. So, but I've come up with a system, actually, the student suggestion. So you have FYI next to the articles. So I tell the students at the beginning of the year, if you see FYI next to something, it's not required reading. It's for your enrichment. If you want to look at it, you're not required. And that seemed to satisfy the students last year, because some students read everything I put up. I think it's really interesting. Other students want to read nothing more than they have to read. So rather than constantly answering the question, gee, is this on the exam? They see FYI, it's not, they're not responsible for it. Because I think it's important not to give, because everyone started doing this and requiring all this outside reading, you could overwhelm the students, because they already have a lot to do already. That's just an example of one recent article. We've been doing at the time property rights and found property, lost property, and so there was a case involving in Massachusetts, something to do with a lottery ticket, it was lost, so I forget the exact thing. But the students could relate to that, because we were reading cases, from Omri versus Del Mare, I think was the one case we read about the chimney sweep finding a jewel in chimney in England in 1782. Students, I remember, actually, I remember it was funny, because in the case it says he found, I think it was a brooch. So I had like 3 students raising, what's a brooch? So, you can use, and I use these as problems. Now, sometimes I'll use them as a problem also. So we'll take that case and we'll apply it to a lottery ticket that's lost. That they're going to relate to. And so it has more meaning to them. I find that often makes a difference. And again, like I said, I read the newspaper pretty much every day, and I'm always finding stuff that I can stick up. We'll talk about it a little later, easy ways to put stuff up. I also include, and this is for efficiencies of my time, this cost information manual. All the various rules about the cost that I don't want to spend time, explaining in detail, and I don't want to have to answer 400 times the same question. So it's all up there. So, if they want to know about how many classes they can miss, my attendance policy, it's all up there. Everything is up there. And this way, if they ask me about something, I say, go look it up. And they seem to be, they've grown a little, but it's all there. It also helps later on in the semester when they, say, well, it's not fair that you're throwing me out of the exam because I missed 17 classes. They say, well, it was up there, the fact that you couldn't miss more than, 4. So it eliminates problems like that, which makes the deans happy. Because they're the ones that get the complaints, not me. Of course, I always tell them it's the deans doing it. It's okay for me to miss it. But, another example of something that creates efficiencies: reviewing exams. I think it's really important that students get feedback with the exams, but over the years I found a lot of times the students really don't want to talk about the exam. They just want to bitch that they didn't get an A, they didn't think they really deserved a C+. It's not fair. They don't want to talk about the exam. They just want to complain about the grade. So what I started doing is I have this procedure, which my secretary takes care of. They email her, and it's all laid out here, and then she sends them a copy of their essay answers, a copy of the exam, and a copy of a model answer that I wrote. A substantial number of the students look at that and they don't really want to talk to me anymore. They understand what they did or didn't do. The ones that still want to talk to me, well, we now have an intelligent discussion about the exam because they actually read everything. And so it eliminates the students who really just want to come in and argue that they should have got a better grade, not because of a particular reason, just because they should. Because they can't possibly have earned a C. It's not possible. And I find that a lot of students look at their exams. It makes a lot of work for my secretary, but it cuts down on a lot of wasted meetings with students. And ones, again, I talk to generally really do want to talk about the exam, and we have somewhat of a more intelligent discussion. These are the course materials. PowerPoints, which I increasingly use, we'll talk about PowerPoints a little later in detail, but I pretty much use them a lot of classes, not every class. But I post them, and I try to post them before the class. Because I find that some of the students who are not particularly good visual learners or auditory learners print them out before class and actually study them and look at them when they come to class and we're prepared. And I've gotten a lot of students that thank me for doing this. Other students who are just pretty much visual learners could care less. They look at it during class. But this at least allows me to reach more students. And again, I've had a lot of students come at the end of the semester and say it was really good that we could print them out before class. It really helped them because their learning style was such they needed to read them, make notes on them, etc. Push me to comment. And the second column there, sample documents. This takes a lot of time to set up, but one of the nice things is when you collect all these documents, you don't have to do it once. But I found, much to my surprise, and I guess it shouldn't have been, it's my ignorance, that students, especially first-year students, you mention a lot of documents in class. Property, you mention wills, power of attorney, easements, deeds, mortgages, etc. Well, you know what? I realized that most of the students have never even seen these documents. And so what I've done is you can find a lot of these very easily online. A lot of registry of deeds now have scanned the original documents in the TIFF format and other things. You can find most of these documents. I put them all up so the students, they hear I mention a mortgage, they can go look at them on their own. And again, this takes some time to do, but the advantage is it's efficient. You don't have to do it once. And you can reuse this again and again and again. Because frankly, maybe I shouldn't be, I'm always amazed that people have never seen any of these documents. What's more amazing is that I've never heard of them. Once we did a case with a mortgage, and I had a couple of students raise their hand, I'd never heard of a mortgage. I'm not sure what it was. I mean, if it was true, I don't think I would have admitted it. There's a few other things I'll post, which I find real useful. For example, exam instructions. I hate towards the end of the semester, you get the students raise their hand. Well, how many multiple choice in the exam? How many essays? How much time do we have? Is it closed book or open book? What do you mean by open book if it's open book? How much does each count? I write the instructions and I post them. And they can read them. I don't have to answer all those questions. Plus, the other advantage is they'll get better information, because if they ask me, I'll probably give them the wrong answer, because I don't remember. And it reduces anxiety for some of the students. For some it may increase it, but for some it decreases it. They can already know it on the exam, in terms of what the instructions are, etc. But also, I generally give open book exams. Done that for a long time. And they're totally open book. But being law students, of course, they come up with interesting twists on that interpretation. I've actually had a student say, well, you said open book, you can bring whatever I want. Can I bring an attorney with me? So I've since had to modify my rules saying you can't bring people with you, and no electronic devices. But anything else, it's all laid out. So therefore, I don't have to spend time in class answering it. Although occasionally the students will ask me, do you really mean what you said there? And I always tell them, yeah, because it won't make any difference. They don't really believe me. So after the grades come out. Email. For a long time, that was, for me, the killer application for using technology in teaching. Although I'll talk about it in a minute, I use a little less today than I used to. But it is an alternative way of sending news articles and things to people. If you don't want to upload them, it's too complicated to upload them, you can just attach them as an email attachment and send them out to everyone. I'd like not to do that because it ties up the server with lots of documents. And also you have the same problem, a week or 2 weeks later someone says, I can't find an email, if you just send me the document again. So I don't want to spend time doing that. So what I moved to is discussion boards, which is a fancy name, I think, for threaded discussion lists. And that way I post things there, and that's available the whole semester. So if they forget it, they can go back and get it. They don't need to bother me. It's available. Nevertheless, I still use email for a couple of things I find really useful. These may seem like small things, but students find it very useful. One is, tie up loose ends. You teach a 50-minute class or a 75-minute class. Sometimes, I go back to the office and I say, I think I might have left them a little confused on a couple of points. So I just sit down, whip off an email. It takes me 5 minutes. Based on what we talked about in class, we want to tie up some loose ends. Also, sometimes, after class, I realize, that really would tie in well to something we did last week. There's some similar issues. So I'll send them an email suggesting, they should think about that. And then, of course, correct any misleading statements. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, I don't know, maybe none of you do this, but sometimes I say things and I realize, that wasn't right. I can't believe I said that. So I sent a corrective email saying, I misspoke. I never say an error, I misspoke. Or maybe they misheard. The other thing that frequently comes up is students will ask a question that frankly I don't know the answer to because it's unrelated to what we're doing. I'll teach property and they ask a civil procedure question. What I know about civil procedure I learned when I took it 25 years ago in law school because I was never a litigator. So I really don't know that material that well. So I'll just go to one of my colleagues, it only takes 2 minutes, down the hall and say, you're the Civ Pro guy, this is the question I was asked, what's the answer? They give me the answer, I send an email. Students are generally very impressed with that. They're impressed with the fact that you don't try to BS them with, answering stuff you don't really know the answer to. Plus, they get a much better answer this way because, I talk to someone in the hallway, my colleague is an expert, and he tells me the correct answer. It's also good because it gets me up to date. I still thought JMOVs existed. I didn't know that they've been changed to JMOLs. And I still thought there was res judicata, but I've now been informed by the Civ Pro teacher that no, it's issue preclusion. So, same thing, they changed the terms. Let me talk about discussion boards a little bit. Because it's only about the second year I've been using it, but I made a lot of mistakes and I've tinkered around a lot. And I think what I've come up with this last semester works pretty well. I create a bunch of discussion boards. And the first one, just general things. I can post things, students can post things. The second one is just announcements, they want to tell them, there's a makeup class, such and such, whatever. The third one, though, I found very useful. I just put it up kind of for the hell of it. I didn't think it would be useful, but student feedback. I got a lot of feedback. A lot positive, a lot negative. But I allowed them to post anonymously. If you don't do that, there's they could do it either way. There was 5 students who posted with their name. Everyone else was anonymous. But, I found it very useful because, sometimes they raised issues I decided it wasn't going to adopt. Other times they raised issues, but that really is an issue. I hadn't thought about that. But also lets me be aware of what's going on in class. For example, last fall, I wasn't aware it was a problem, but I assigned seats after the first class. You can't move. And students were upset. They were getting distracted by other students using their laptops and, shopping, looking at email, IMing, whatever. It's not that they cared that they were doing it, but it was distracting to them. I didn't really realize that was a problem. So I responded by putting up a thing saying, well, if you're really distracted by someone, feel free to come up after class. You don't have to explain it. Take my seating chart, cross out your name, and put yourself in another seat. About 5 people did. And I said, I don't want to know why, just you can move. They were happy at that. But it was a problem I wasn't really aware of, and perhaps wouldn't have known. The other thing that happened that was kind of funny is that the student feedback list, I forget what it was. There was a problem with people bringing coffee or something in, and the students worked it out themselves. I didn't intervene. They posted, one was really upset, someone else responded, and after about 10 posts, they worked it out with my intervention. And they were amazingly civil. Of course, maybe that's because they knew I was monitoring everything. If I wasn't monitoring, they wouldn't have been so civil. The other thing I found really useful, I started before, I created a separate discussion board for every topic we covered in the semester. And that way it was more targeted. So if students had questions, well, this is obviously the first couple of weeks, what's law, what's property, give more specific ones, adverse possession, lost found property, etc. They could post questions directly related to that topic. And actually, I found it to be, the students found it most useful the last couple of weeks of class they were studying for exams. Because they would say, well, I got a problem with future interest. So they'd look at the future interest board and they'd post it there. And other students would answer, and then I would just interject when necessary. If someone was going way off track, I would interject. But the nice thing was it creates efficiencies. If one student has a question, probably the whole class does. And this way, they all can see the answer. With email, I would get the same question repeatedly. I'd get an email question saying, I don't understand the difference between a executory interest and a contingent remainder. So I'd answer it. The next day, I get the same question. I might get it 15 times. This way, they answer it once. They can all see the answer. And it's much more efficient. Plus, I'm giving everyone the same answer. And the other thing is, it's available for the whole semester. So they don't have to bother me and say, I can't find an email. It's all up there. They can look at it. Now, the one thing I have found, this works as a two-way medium mostly for first-year students. For upper-class students, I've simply accepted the fact that's a one-way medium. I post information. Upper-class students, sort of putting a gun to their head, are not going to post anything on a discussion board I discovered. So rather than try and force them, I just accept that fact. And I use it mostly as a medium to send them information. But first year students, some classes make a tremendous amount of use of it. And I think it's good for them, it's efficient for me. I also put up my old exams. I know that a lot of libraries do this, for faculty, but I don't like that because when they do it in paper, the exams always disappear and someone steals them, whatever. We moved to a system in Southwark where the library maintains them on a website. I don't like that either. Well, for two reasons. One, because I'm a control freak and I control everything. But the other reason is I don't want a lot of old exams out there because the law changes. It's great. A student reads an old exam and it's on an issue which is not an issue anymore. The way I make tests changes over time. So what I usually do is the previous 2 years worth of exams I put up. And then I rotate them. And they're fairly current with kind of things that I test. Also, by putting them up on Blackboard, I direct students, especially in the first year, to look at the exams by the third week. So they get some idea, because all professors love to tell students, this isn't like undergraduate school, it's not about memorization, you're going to be tested on analysis. Yeah, they shake their head, and they believe that, like, when their father tells them something. They don't believe it. I get them to look at the exams, and it helps them to see, oh yeah, he isn't kidding. Look at those multiple choice questions. All of them, to say which of the following is the most correct, and gee, all 4 answers look correct. And of course I reinforce that, no, yeah, they are all correct. To get them to understand that it's about analysis, it's not about memorizing. Other thing I found useful, I didn't arrow with humor, I collect legal humor. You'd be amazed how much stuff there is. I've actually found jokes on future interests. I don't know if anyone but a lawyer would understand the joke, but I find a lot of IP jokes. I put those out for doesn't have a sense of humor. But the other thing I found is a lot of times related areas of law come up peripheral to what we're doing. For example, in property, we did a case, I remember something to do with a lost ring, and there were agency issues in the case. But, agency is not a topic that we normally discuss in first-year property, but it was relevant to the case. So I put up like a 4 or 5 page overview of agency law. So the students who wanted to get a better understanding could go read it. And that would help them understand the case better. Of course, not all students look at it. The better students tend to go look at it. The poorer students tend to ignore it, which is probably why they're poorer students. But I find that this saves the students actually time. Instead of having to run around the library or spend money in the bookstore buying study aids, they can just look at the material I've given them. It saves them time, it saves them money. And I know they got the right information at least. Also find it's really useful to post information, a lot of enrichment information. This is what I use for first year students. First year students haven't had to brief cases, so you click on case briefing and there's a couple of articles, descriptive articles, and actually how you go about briefing cases. And then there's Peter Martin's site at Cornell, which is really good. It's an interactive website-based citation thing. Students, obviously not in my class, but that's an issue they need for legal research and writing. And it's helpful because it's a pretty good site. I'm not going to reinvent it, somebody already did. So I have to link to it. And again, one of the things I mentioned before, a lot of this stuff can be, not so much this, but other stuff you put up can be used in multiple classes. So, there's a lot of efficiencies. This is something I started, I've always done this, but I started putting it on the website recently. I find that students really don't know how to study in law school. When I was in law school, they told us, well, it's all about analysis, and you have to understand, develop your critical thinking skills. That was great. I didn't know what that meant exactly. So I actually give a lecture every year for about an hour on study skills. I break it down, and I give them a schematic of how they should study. But I find 2 things. One, I don't want to waste class time on it because there's so little class time anyway. I do it outside of class. Well, some students can't come. It's kind of unfair. So I record it. And it has 2 advantages. One, the students who can't come can listen to it. But also, some of the students, when they hear it the 3rd week of the semester, have no idea what I'm talking about. It makes no sense to them. They can go and listen to it again in their exams. And now some of them say, oh, now I know what you were talking about. Some of them takes to the end of the 2nd semester. So they listen to it again. And this way I don't have to repeat it. I do it once and it's up there. The other thing is, I don't do this often, but sometimes for whatever reason, they just don't have time to do it one year. So I just put the lecture up from last year. It doesn't change that much year to year. So they're easy to keep. They're just a computer file. I also do on exam taking skills. The same thing. Students aren't really all that certain how to take exams a lot of times. So in that sense, what I've actually done is created a bunch of little files. And by little, these are anywhere from 3 minutes to 10 minutes. And that's small enough the students can actually listen to it. For example, answering essay questions. Actually, I think that's an 8-minute file. I actually go through and I explain, this is what I'm looking for. The following 5 things. This is what I mean. And by making them short, they're more likely to listen to them. And by making them, a lot of them, they're more directed. So the student is worried about objective questions, they can listen to that and get a sense of what I'm looking for. And these are great because these I don't do every year. These I just put up on the website. The students can listen to them. You're only going to make them once. I also find since I got to make them once, I can take a lot of time to make them really carefully and stop and start the recorder so that it sounds really good when I put it up. Well, going back to the I do a review class at the end of every course that I teach, not because I think they're useful, I think they're useless, but the students for some reason think it's the most wonderful thing in the world, so it gets good marketing. I don't know. Basically, I go through the table of contents and I mention every section with 2 words about it. They think this is wonderful. I'm not certain why, but they do, so I do it. It makes them happy. But again, you have the same problem. You can't always, everyone can't attend. For example, last year when I teach a summer school in Suffolk, we had the Democratic National Convention the last week before the exam, and it tied the whole city up. And so, no one was going to be able to come to the review class. So I just sat down, I recorded it, and put it up on Blackboard, and they listened to it at home. It's also good to put it to sleep, I tell them. That's another trick I learned recently. If you hit the B key when you're showing PowerPoints, the screen blanks out. And that's useful if you want people not to focus on that. Like I didn't want you to look at that PowerPoint because I'm going to do that one next. So it gets people to focus on me. Because I find if you put something up and you talk about something different, no one listens to it. It goes on the screen. And hit the B key again, it comes back up. Those are kind of shortcuts I don't seem to mention in the manual, but someone told me about those. In terms of audio files, one of the things, this morning in an earlier session, earlier this afternoon, they talked about the class casting or podcasting John May was talking about. This is really to do with the same thing. The only difference is he was talking about a simple way to create the files and to get them up. And that's probably will work well in the future, but right now I'm not sure that you can do it that way. What I do to create audio files is a couple very simple ways to do it. The easiest way is to get a little handheld digital recorder. It's about $120. This is an old one, 2-3 years old. That'll hold 5 hours of recording. And they have really good pickups. This is a Olympus, but lots of them. I'll just put it right here. We don't waste the glass. And it picks, it's not fantastic quality, but it's more than adequate for people to listen to. And it creates this comes with a cradle. You pop it into the cradle. It automatically downloads the file to my computer, and it converts it to a WAV format. And I'll talk about formats in a few minutes, but you just upload it on Blackboard or Lexis. You go to the program, there's a place to upload files, you just upload it. It'll take a little while because they're big, but then you're done. And the students can listen to them. It's all it takes. There's other ways to do it, but I frankly found this to be the simplest. There's also programs in the computer you can use, but I found this to be quite simple. And then I can just bring it to class, put it in my pocket when I'm done. Posting documents. There's really 2 ways that I do it. Let me just talk about each. One is simply just upload the documents. That's the easiest way to go Blackboard when you upload. But I have a lot of documents on my website and other documents on the server. I have documents all over the place. So a lot of times I just put up a web link, which also, if you look at Blackboard and Twitter, it's relatively easy to do. And the students don't even know. I mean, you click on it and it pops right up in Blackboard. It looks like it's on the site. It also has the advantage of bigger files will come up faster because you're not going off the server someplace. But that's a little more complicated. There's another way to do it, but just loading works fine. Document format. This is actually a simple thing, but it creates a lot of problems for people. I mean, you know, everyone's familiar with probably HTML documents, Word, WordPerfect, and PDF. The only one that I find it's worth using is PDF. Why? Well, because, as most of you I'm sure know, if you record files, I'll forget it. If you make files in HTML, Word, or WordPerfect, and you load them up on Twin or Blackboard, they're not going to come up right all the time. Depending on the system someone's using, they look different. They don't. The spacing may be messed up. PDF is a graphic file. It comes up the same on every computer all the time. Anyone who has a computer that's at least no more than 4 or 5 years old can read PDF. There's a free reader program you can get from Adobe Acrobat, and most computers already come with it loaded. And I find I have very few problems with PDF. The only issue that you have, obviously, is you got to convert things. So again, your school probably already has a license for Adobe Acrobat. Most schools do. And that's a program you can just automatically download. It will insert an icon into Word or WordPerfect. And you can simply create a file, click on Convert to PDF, you have a PDF, and just upload it. If your school doesn't have Adobe Acrobat, it's an expensive program. There are some very cheap programs that just do the conversions to PDF, but don't do the other stuff. Because Adobe Acrobat does a million things, more than most people probably want to do. Audio files will probably change, but I've used different formats over the years. Right now, MP3 is the best to use. So whatever it's in, you convert it. All the students know what an MP3 is. All the students have to do is they can read MP3 files. I've never had a problem. When I used real audio before, some students couldn't get them to work. There were problems. WAV files were just too big. And there's a lot of proprietary formats. The easiest way to deal with this is whatever format I use, because all these recorders have proprietary formats. I bought a $20 program that converts from one format to the other. So I put everything into MP3 and I upload it. And I haven't had a single problem with a student being able to access and listen to an MP3 file. PowerPoints. I want to talk just specifically, there's a few minutes remaining. Well, by the way, I should mention, if you have questions or anything that I think feel asked, just yell out. If you violently disagree with anything I say, feel free. Won't be offended. I have teenagers, so I say good morning to my daughter, that's a problem. I didn't say the right tone. I get a lecture from her. Now I just don't talk to her. But anyway. A couple of things about PowerPoints, because this is one, I think, a wonderful application, but it's the most abused of all the applications. I may even have abused it today, I don't know. But the thing about PowerPoint, it's not a substitute for teaching. You still have to teach. It's just something to facilitate or help the teaching. Too many times, what I see people do is they go to CALI programs, and the person stands there and reads his PowerPoints to you, which have, 500 words on every PowerPoint. Well, that's not really the appropriate use, because you could have just sent me the PowerPoints, I could have stayed home and read them. PowerPoint shouldn't be a substitute for the class. And, I've learned this from experience. I mean, I've been using PowerPoints a couple of years, and I went from being enamored to using all kinds of special effects and stuff, realizing a lot of this wasn't really too useful for students. To now I've come to the conclusion, you want the least number of words on it. It should simply be something to trigger what you're talking about. Why should you use PowerPoint? It shouldn't be your entire lecture. It shouldn't be up there. The other thing I found, and I was guilty of this, is don't get too creative with sounds and graphics and stuff. I was so enamored of that stuff. I was using all kinds of stuff, mainly because I could do it, not because it was a particularly great educational advantage. I figured out a way to work in exploding sounds and lots of other things, which amused me, but I don't think the two students were terribly entertained by it. I thought it was terribly valuable. There's a couple other comments about PowerPoint I think which are important. One, it shouldn't drive the teaching either. You know, in other words, if you have a 30 PowerPoints and you come in with those 30 PowerPoints, you have to prevent yourself from having that control what you're going to do. Some people are like, I got to follow PowerPoint. Well, class discussion may veer off. And the way I deal with that is I don't worry about if I don't use all the PowerPoints. A lot of times I only use half of them because the discussion goes in a different direction. The other thing that's useful is to jump around. If you number them all, and you press the number of the PowerPoint followed by enter, it jumps to that PowerPoint. And frequently I'll jump around because, you know, I figured out during the class the way it's going, some of the PowerPoints I'm going to talk about really don't fit in. So rather than have the class driven by those PowerPoints, sometimes I just don't use them. You don't be afraid to skip around. The other thing, and I think it's becoming more common thing, if you have any input into the projectors, make sure your school buys the ones like this with the bright lights where you can leave the lights on. The older ones, you turn the lights off and everybody goes to sleep. I have vivid memories of physics class in high school. You see film strips. And I never saw any of them because I always fell asleep. So you turn the lights off and went to sleep. Because the newer projectors, you can leave the lights on. They're plenty bright enough. Let me just give I have a whole bunch of PowerPoints left, just examples of the types of PowerPoints that I use, and I'll just run through them. But again, I find, going back to what we talked about before, you want them to facilitate teaching, not to be a replacement for education. So when I do the pop-off case with Barry Bonds, I throw that one up. Because, you know, I see Barry Bond, they're random. And I leave this up while we're discussing it. But this is the latest thing I've been playing with, just learning how to do this. I don't know if this will come up or not. Is making little movies. And I come up. Oh. 3 minutes. And I show them this because the case talks about this mad melee to get the ball afterwards. I don't have to see what it looks like. They get a better handle from that than me just explaining it. That I'm still learning how to do. It wasn't that hard. I'm still playing with that. Typically uses problems. If I'm going to spend 10, 20 minutes, this is a problem I'll probably spend 20 minutes on in property. I leave this up for the whole discussion. And then people can look at it and can remember the names of the people and the dates. It's very useful. I just leave that for the whole discussion as opposed to me just giving them the problem and trying to remember the dates and everything else. This on its face violates the rule of having too much text, but this is when you want people to focus on language. That's a will book, or maybe it's a statute. Over the years, I found, telling the students to focus on something in their book doesn't work. 6 students can't find their book. The other 3 can't find their book pages. So I just put it up here. You get everyone to focus on that. Also has another advantage. They then look up as opposed to looking down at their book, hoping they're going to fall on. This makes them look up. And then you can focus on, well, what does the word issue mean? So based on the reading today, what would your eye do, et cetera. I find that to be very useful in focusing students better. Here's an example of a problem out of the book. I diagrammed it, and I leave it up there for the whole discussion. And again, that's, for the non-auditory learners, this helps those people keep track of what's going on. Some graphics. Students tell me that they find these wonderful. This is this illustrates, if anyone teaches property, the common law rule that you can't enlarge the dominant estate when you go out to an easement. For whatever reason, students have a hard time getting this. But I find when I use this, they get it. They come and say, oh, I understand what the graphic, I understand the rule now. So I find, it's the old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Another example. This is actually my patent class. You all go to Starbucks and you get little coffee rings, you don't burn your hand. That's patented, believe it or not. And that's the picture of it from the patent. And we have a whole class we spend related to that invention. And I leave this up so they can refer to the picture. That's something you probably want to know about. That's a patent claim. The strangest kind of legal writing that exists. But I teach a course in this area, so we have to look at these. Don't try to make any sense out of it. But I use that because we talk about claims, and there are certain parts, and you have to use a lot of precision in the words that you use. So This allows me to talk about it for quite a bit of long time, and I keep it up there for the whole time, and I can refer to things and point to things. I find that useful. Timelines. Sometimes you do a case with, there's like 10 different dates, transactions. I find that useful to keep up there in a discussion. Yeah.
Just to note, I've been noticing about all of you've got a lot of graphics here talking about problems and timelines. One of the ways that you can help your students that are more visually orientated, that a lot of folks don't know about it, there's a lot of animation that you can use to lead them through. So instead of having all that up at once, you can just use one, talk about the first thing, and then the second one can appear along with the first one, and then the third one lead them through as well, which sometimes helps.
No, it's true, and that's fairly easy with the animation to do that. Just clicks. I do that sometimes too. But yeah, that's a good point. Because sometimes this is too much information at once. This is for a patent case. This is when I was playing around. Don't know if this is beneficial. I'm trying to learn. The invention is a microbe that eats oil. So, illustrates I'm not sure that's education beneficial, but it was fun to me. Just jump ahead. Also find charts like this, and this is when I teach in trademark law. We talk about different kinds of trademarks, and I'll give them hypotheticals. Say, well, this is the trademark. Where does it fall? Which category? And it's really useful to leave that up because they can refer to that. Just go to the last one. Sometimes when I show these, people say, "Oh my God, you're so talented. How do you make all those PowerPoints?" Actually, I'm not that talented. You don't really have to know that much to make all those PowerPoints. Actually, if you know how to do those 4 things in PowerPoint, that's all you need to know. You don't use text boxes. You know how to create them and format them and insert them. You can do an incredible amount of stuff. It may not be the simplest way to do it, but it works quite well. Auto shapes. You can create auto shapes, the same thing, and format them and create different colors. It's amazing what you can do with that. And also changing fonts, sizes, and colors really emphasizes stuff. The final thing is a print screen key. It's usually in the upper right-hand side of the computer keyboard. It's a really old key left over from the past. But if you get something on the screen and you want to put it in a PowerPoint, you hit print screen, it dumps it onto the clipboard. You go into PowerPoint, you hit insert, it dumps it on there. So it's a very simple way to capture anything off the internet or whatever. You can see it on your screen, you can dump it into a PowerPoint. Just knowing those 4 things, which aren't that difficult, you have to tech people show you how to use them, you could make all those PowerPoints that I did and even much fancier. You don't need to know all those functions in PowerPoint. All 92,000 different things that it does, which most of them I don't understand anyway. Questions? Yeah?
I had a question going back to your first report when you were talking about Blackboard, and you had we've been talking with different faculty members that have been using PowerPoint, Blackboard well to kind of come up with best practices. And you hit on almost everything that they touched on was great. One of the
sometimes we're making them wrong a lot. That's how we're making it the right way.
One of the questions that they had was that when you have a lot of information on a Blackboard site, which you did, and the FYI piece is great. How do you, if you have that all up at the beginning of the semester, and if not, when you're adding things to different areas, how do you let your students know what area of the Blackboard site that they should look at so they're not missing things?
There's a notification function built into Blackboard and into Twin. And if you activate it, it sends out an email telling you what you've added and where it's added. And that's a wonderful thing, because then they don't have to keep checking. It's also wonderful for me, and then when they post it on the discussion board. And that's built in, just have to activate it. Other question? Yeah.
When you recycle stuff, do you just repost the entire Blackboard and show stuff, or do you actually download everything and you put it back up and
well, what I do is there's a function in Blackboard, it's probably in Twin also, you can export the whole course into a zip file, and you can import it again. So what I export it, then I re-import it, then I make all my changes.
But you don't copy the Blackboard.
You can. You can simply export it and just change the dates and reuse it.
The other thing to do is hide things and then reveal what people are.
Yeah, yeah, there's a function where you can put in dates when stuff will pop up. So you can put it all in the beginning and then stagger it to the dates. I do that a lot. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.